Alright, how's it going, everyone? And welcome to another Torah Commentators Commute. Still working on that. Anyway, I only have a few minutes before I get home, and I was thinking about deception. And, you know, if you want to understand how something came about, or if you want to understand the biblical concept of something, you go to the earliest mention. Within hermeneutics, there's the law of first mention. And so with that in mind, we go to the first case of deception. And the first case of deception being Eve. And what I wanted to talk about was, I'll start off with the premise that deception begins in the heart of rebellion. And so it's before you're deceived, you have the heart of rebellion, and you formulate or find opinions or agree with positions that will fuel the rebellion that is within the heart. Now here is how I came to this understanding, or at least this conclusion. It could be wrong, but this conclusion. So when Eve, she saw the fruit, and she saw that it was good. But before that, the serpent is trying to deceive her. And he says, he's going through the list of things that, she's allowed to do, not allowed to do. And she says, we can do anything we want except eat from the tree, or the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And he says, surely did God not say, or did God say that you can't eat from this tree? And so he generates the question in her mind, in her heart, and then he proceeds to ask more questions. Or not ask more questions, but what does he do? He goes directly into feeding the desires of her heart. So one of those being, it's threefold. He says that if you eat it, the reason why God doesn't want you to is because God's a selfish God. But the reason why he doesn't want you to eat of it is because you will become like him, knowing good and evil. Well, what else is like him? You'll live forever. And so you'll have knowledge, you'll have power, and you'll live forever. Becoming like God. Aspiring to be that which is greater than who you are. But not in an academic sense or in a knowledge sense of the pursuit of truth, but in a sense of you were created at a certain plane at a certain point in time to be a certain thing, and you are desiring to transcend that. So by transcend that, I mean transcendentalism is the idea of transcending your physical self into a spiritual self and separating the body from the mind. In the transhumanist movement, it's the idea that you can transcend the limitations, the known limitations of the human mind, body, spirit, soul, and psyche. So in Eve's case, she was tempted by her own rebellion that fueled the desire to transcend her created position and becoming equal to, if not like, God himself. So deception begins in the heart of rebellion. And how do we know that? And so if it begins in the heart of rebellion, then how can we know for certain, for absolute certainty, if we're deceived? Now here's where it gets interesting. If deception begins in the heart of rebellion, then we know we are deceived if we're rebelling, or if we're believing anything that fuels rebellion, disobedience, wickedness, lawlessness, right? So the natural inclination for man, for humankind, is towards evil, and evil being lawlessness. I mean, that's just the natural bent of who and what we are. And but how do we know if we are walking out in rebellion? If anything that we believe, the information that we store within who we are, the people we surround ourselves with, the positions, like I was saying before, the positions, the opinions, the information, if any of those fuel rebellion, and if any of those fuel our heart towards the slant of rebellion, then we're deceived. Now here's the other problem. If we don't have an understanding of what rebellion is, of what sin is, of what breaking the commandments is, if we don't have any concept of what that is, we're not going to know if we're deceived, because we are going to be absolutely sure we're going to be sincerely wrong. I mean, you can be sincerely right and you can be sincerely wrong. And if we don't understand what sin is, then we aren't going to be able to identify rebellion, because we don't have a definition for which to base rebellion off of. And if we don't have that definition, or if it's muddied, like what's a sin for you is not a sin for you or me, but a sin for me might not be a sin for you. So if we muddy the definition of sin, if we muddy the definition of rebellion, then we don't know how to identify if we are being deceived. So the only way to be 100% absolutely sure that we're not deceived is if anything that we believe, practice, or do falls directly in line with blind obedience. Now, it sounds kind of crazy to our Greek self, blind obedience. You know, we've been raised within the Christian church all of our life that we don't have a blind faith. And to an extent, that's true. We don't have a blind faith. But within the Hebraic mindset, within the concept of Scripture, we are required to hear the words of God and then walk out in obedience. Now, why is that? For one, it's absolute loyalty to the King of the universe, right? And so it's walking out in obedience, because through obedience, He brings us into all understanding. And so we know we're deceived. I'm almost done here. But we know that we're deceived if anything that we believe goes counter to anything in Scripture. Anything that we do, anything that we hold dear, whether it's the food that we eat, the days that we gather on or don't gather on, the feasts that we partake in or don't partake in, those are just rudimentary things. How we dress, how we mix our clothes, how we interact with each other, the way we talk about each other behind each other's back, if at all. All of these things are explicitly laid out in Torah, and we know that we're deceived if anything that we're doing goes against Torah. We know that we're deceived especially if anything that we believe has twisted the words of Messiah to go against Torah in any way, shape, or form. And if we make excuses as to what the Messiah did, well, the Messiah, he went and picked wheat on the Sabbath. Okay? You're fundamentally misunderstanding the Torah itself and the Torah's purpose, which is the preservation of life. And when we do that, when we twist the words of Messiah, we make Him out to be a liar. We make God out to be a liar, because we're saying that in Matthew 7, we're saying that He came to teach His Father's doctrine. But then in the same breath, we say that He made it so we don't have to observe the Torah or observe the Sabbath even. Just the Sabbath is one example. We made it so that He doesn't have to observe this, that we don't have to observe the Sabbath, that He also broke the Sabbath, but yet He's saying that He came to teach His Father's doctrine, not His own, which makes Him out to be a liar. I mean, we are calling the Messiah a liar when we believe these things. We are utterly deceived. Deception begins in the heart of rebellion. And the heart of rebellion is, I don't have to do these things. I like the way that sounds, the tickling of the ears. I like the way that sounds because it doesn't require anything of me. It doesn't require me to submit to His rulership and kingship when we do those things, when we take those positions. And those positions, especially within the Western Christian church, those positions and what we believe in, what we were raised in, fuel the heart of rebellion, which is walking against His commandments. And that's the very definition of the broad road. The narrow path, the path that is hard to find, the path that is hard to get to, is the path that is of sheer obedience. So, that being said, there's today's commentary. I hope you enjoy, and I'll talk to you guys later.